Olivia Hart was supposed to be home by midnight. Mark Lawson was never supposed to be seen with her. And Daniel Hart, her husband, was the only one who knew exactly why they both vanished that night. What began as a secret affair quickly spiraled into something far more sinister. By the time the town of Willow Creek realized Olivia was missing, one body had already been buried and the other was just a matter of time. Who was the real danger? Her lover, her husband, or someone no one ever suspected? The truth was darker than anyone imagined, and it was buried where no one thought to look. In the quiet town of Willow Creek, life moved at a gentle pace, the kind of place where neighbors greeted each other on the street and everyone seemed to know everyone else's business. Among the residents was Olivia Hart, a woman who appeared to have it all: a loving husband, a beautiful home, and 2 children who adored her. On the surface, Olivia's life seemed perfect. But beneath the calm exterior, a secret simmered, something no one in the town could have guessed. Olivia was not the woman everyone thought she was. Behind closed doors she carried a restless heart, yearning for something beyond the daily routine of family dinners and school runs. Her marriage to Daniel Hart, a steady and reliable man, had begun to feel like a cage. There were moments when she felt invisible, trapped in a life that no longer filled her soul. It was during those moments, in the shadows of her quiet world, that she sought out Mark Lawson. Mark was a figure that stirred curiosity and unease in Willow Creek. Unlike Olivia, he was a stranger in town, someone who had drifted from place to place without ever truly settling. His past was a mystery, wrapped in rumors. Some said he had run from trouble. Others whispered about the secrets he carried in his eyes. Mark was the kind of man who didn't ask for attention but seemed to command it whenever he entered a room. His presence was magnetic, a sharp contrast to the steady predictability of Daniel. Olivia and Mark's paths crossed one evening when she found herself walking along the edge of town, drawn by a need she couldn't explain. Their meeting was accidental, or so it seemed at first. There was an undeniable spark between them, a connection that neither of them could ignore. What started as casual conversations in quiet cafes turned into secret meetings under the cloak of night. They chose hidden places for their encounters: an old, forgotten barn, far from the town's main roads, a secluded bench beside the river, even the dense woods where the trees seemed to swallow sound and shield them from the world. Every meeting was a dangerous gamble. Olivia knew the risk. If anyone found out, her life as she knew it would shatter. Yet the pull was too strong to resist. The nights became their sanctuary, a world where rules didn't apply. Olivia found herself slipping further away from the life she had promised to protect. Her heart raced with a mixture of fear and excitement every time she met Mark. She was caught between 2 worlds: the stable, safe life with Daniel and the thrilling, uncertain future Mark represented. But the secret couldn't stay buried forever. In Willow Creek, rumors had a way of spreading, and eyes were always watching. Daniel, while quiet and reserved, wasn't blind. He noticed the subtle changes, the late nights, the hurried texts, the distant look in Olivia's eyes. He felt something shifting in their marriage, a tension that grew heavier each day. What Daniel didn't know was how deep the secret ran. Olivia and Mark weren't just hiding a harmless fling. Their connection carried weight, one that threatened to unravel everything. It was a delicate web of lies and half-truths, and the slightest misstep could bring it all crashing down. On one chilling autumn evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and shadows stretched long across the town, Olivia and Mark met in their usual spot, the old barn. The air was thick with tension, but also a strange sense of urgency. Neither spoke of the risks that pressed in on them, but they both felt it. Something was about to change, something that would set a dark chain of events into motion. Unseen by them, a figure watched from the edge of the trees. Daniel had followed Olivia, driven by a storm of emotions he couldn't contain. What he saw that night would haunt him forever. It was a moment of betrayal, but also the beginning of a secret so dangerous it would lead to a tragedy no one in Willow Creek could forget. The peaceful town was about to be shattered, and no one could predict how far the darkness would reach. The story of Olivia and Mark was only just beginning, and the truth behind their secret was more terrifying than anyone could imagine. Daniel Hart was a man who rarely let his emotions show. To the outside world, he was calm, dependable, and quiet. Exactly the kind of husband anyone would admire. But beneath that composed exterior, a storm was brewing. The night he followed Olivia to the old barn changed everything. It was a moment Daniel never expected to witness, and one that would unravel his carefully built life. He had spent weeks piecing together the clues, the late phone calls that stopped the moment he entered the room, the strange scent on Olivia's clothes when she returned home late at night, the distant look in her eyes that no explanation could soften. Daniel's suspicion grew like a dark seed in his mind, twisting into something dangerous and relentless. He couldn't ignore it any longer. He had to know the truth. The night was colder than usual, the kind of chill that seeps into your bones and makes the world feel heavy. Daniel parked his car just beyond the clearing near the barn, hidden by thick bushes. His heart pounded so loudly he was sure Olivia could hear it, even from where she was. He waited, breath shallow, eyes fixed on the barn's weathered wooden door that creaked slightly in the wind. Then, he saw her. Olivia stepped out, her face lit by the pale moonlight, her eyes searching nervously for someone. A moment later, Mark emerged from the shadows, tall, composed, his presence like a dark flame against the night. The two of them moved toward each other with a closeness that Daniel had never seen before. The way they looked at each other was no longer a secret to hide. It was a betrayal laid bare. Daniel's hands trembled as he gripped the steering wheel, anger mixing with a deep, aching hurt. He wanted to shout, to demand answers, but something stopped him, a cold, calculating voice in his head, telling him to stay silent, to watch, to learn everything. If he lost control now, everything would be lost. But the feeling of being betrayed, of being invisible in his own home, crushed him. For hours he remained there, watching Olivia and Mark disappear into the barn. Shadows moved behind the cracked door, but no sounds escaped. It was as if the world had quieted itself just for this moment. Daniel's mind raced. Who was Mark really? What did he want from Olivia? And how far was Olivia willing to go to keep this secret? As the night deepened, Daniel realized the danger of what he was witnessing. This wasn't just an affair, it was something darker, something more complicated. Mark wasn't just a stranger with charm. There was an edge to him, a hidden threat beneath his calm exterior. Daniel felt trapped between his rage and fear, unsure if exposing this would save his family or destroy it forever. Days passed, but Daniel's thoughts didn't ease. He began to follow Mark's movements, watching from a distance as the man moved through town with a confidence that unnerved him. Mark seemed to know things about people, secrets that he used to control situations without raising suspicion. Daniel realized Mark's connection to Olivia might be part of something much bigger than a simple betrayal. Meanwhile, Olivia's behavior grew more secretive. She became defensive when Daniel tried to talk to her, avoiding his gaze and slipping out of the house at odd hours. The walls of their home, once filled with warmth and trust, now felt cold and suffocating. Daniel's quiet patience was running thin, replaced by a desperate need to confront the truth. But confronting Olivia wasn't enough. Daniel wanted answers from Mark, but Mark had disappeared. Without warning, he vanished from town, leaving behind only questions and fear. Rumors began to swirl. Was Mark running from something worse than a scandal? Was he involved in something dangerous that could ruin everyone connected to him? Daniel was left alone with his suspicion, his anger, and a secret that weighed heavier each day. The man he thought he knew, his wife, was no longer the woman beside him, and the stranger who had entered their lives brought with him a darkness that threatened to swallow them whole. The quiet town of Willow Creek began to change. What had seemed like a small betrayal was growing into a mystery that would shake the community to its core. Daniel's calm facade cracked as he wrestled with a choice: protect his family at any cost, or let the truth come out, no matter the consequences. In the shadows of the old barn, secrets waited to be uncovered. And Daniel was about to learn that some truths are far more dangerous than lies. Daniel no longer looked at the world the same way. Since the night he saw Olivia in Mark's arms, something inside him had shifted. What once felt like confusion and sadness had hardened into something colder, an unshakable resolve. He knew what he had witnessed. He knew what it meant. And now, he couldn't go back to pretending. Every smile from Olivia, every casual word she spoke, sounded like a lie. He listened carefully now, watched closely. Every movement, every message, every step, he recorded it all in his mind like a machine. But he didn't confront her. He didn't shout or demand answers. That would be too easy. He didn't want to fight. He wanted control. The quiet man that everyone trusted was gone. In his place was someone else entirely, a man willing to do whatever it took to take back the life that had slipped from his grasp. Daniel's first step was to understand the full picture. If Olivia had lied about her late nights, what else had she hidden? How long had this been going on? And what did Mark want from her? Was it only about desire, or was there something deeper? Daniel began digging, searching through Olivia's emails, her texts, her browser history. He even installed a hidden app on her phone, tracking her location when she left the house. He told himself it wasn't spying, it was protection from whatever was coming. Then, strange pieces started falling into place. Daniel discovered that Mark wasn't just someone passing through. He had arrived in Willow Creek under a different name. In the town's local registry, he was listed as Marcus Lee. But when Daniel ran an online search, he found the same man linked to a series of incidents in a nearby city. Fraud, threats, even a suspected arson. Nothing ever stuck, but his name kept appearing like a shadow behind other people's disasters. Mark was a man who erased his past. Someone who slipped through the cracks just before the walls collapsed. The realization sent a chill through Daniel's spine. Olivia hadn't just betrayed him with another man. She had gotten involved with someone dangerous. Whether she knew it or not, she was in deeper than she understood. And now Daniel saw the situation clearly. This wasn't just about love or lust. It was about survival. If Mark was capable of such things, then what might he do if Olivia tried to end it? Or if Daniel exposed him? Every day, Daniel watched Olivia as if she were a stranger. Her routine looked normal. Grocery store, work, picking up the kids, but everything had changed. He saw the tension in her posture, the way she glanced over her shoulder more often now. He wondered if she could feel him slipping away, not with anger, but with quiet calculation. And still he said nothing. One night, Daniel followed her again. This time, she didn't go to the barn. She drove instead to a motel just outside town. He parked at a distance and waited. An hour passed. Then two. Finally, Mark appeared. Daniel gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. The motel lights flickered above the doorway as Olivia let him in. That was the moment Daniel made up his mind. Not about revenge. About silence. He couldn't confront them. He couldn't call the police. That would lead to scandal, exposure, shame for the kids. No, if he wanted to protect what mattered, he had to be smarter. More careful. The secret had to disappear, completely. Daniel wasn't thinking like a husband anymore. He was thinking like someone who had nothing left to lose. He began writing a plan. A timeline. He tracked where Olivia went, when she left, how long she stayed. He mapped out the route to the barn, the river, the woods. He studied Mark's habits, the way he drove, where he parked, how often he changed his number. Daniel stopped sleeping. He stopped eating full meals. Every ounce of energy went into creating a perfect solution. He knew the day would come, a moment when he could act without question, without mistake. He just had to wait for the right night, when no one would be watching, when every piece was in place. A moment where he could remove the threat and bury the secret forever. And that moment was coming. Soon. The morning Olivia Hart vanished was gray and silent, as if the town of Willow Creek itself sensed something was wrong. A thick fog hung low over the streets, muffling sounds and softening shapes. Daniel stood in the kitchen, staring out the window, coffee growing cold in his hand. Olivia hadn't come home the night before. She hadn't answered her phone. Not a single message, just silence. To everyone else, it was a mystery. To Daniel, it was the plan in motion. He had said nothing when she left the house the previous evening. She told him she needed time to think, that she was going for a drive to clear her head. Her voice was flat, her eyes distant. He simply nodded, letting her believe that he still didn't know. She walked out the front door without looking back. By the time midnight came and went, people started noticing. Olivia's sister, who lived 2 streets over, called her phone repeatedly. Friends sent worried texts. No one knew what was happening. Everyone thought it was just a misunderstanding. She'd come back. She always did. But as the hours stretched into morning, worry took hold. Then came the discovery that shifted the town's mood from confusion to fear. Olivia's car was found abandoned near the riverbank, parked at an odd angle as if she had left in a hurry. The driver's door was unlocked, and her purse was still inside. The keys were missing. There were no signs of a struggle, no footprints in the damp soil, no clues left behind. Just an empty vehicle and the creeping dread that something was very wrong. The police began their search immediately, bringing in dogs, drones, and volunteers from the community. The river was roared, the woods combed, the roads checked for tire marks. Nothing. It was as if Olivia had vanished into thin air. Whispers traveled fast in Willow Creek. Some said she ran away with a lover. Others believed something terrible had happened. And then there were those who quietly began to suspect Daniel. He handled the attention well, or so it seemed. He cried at the press conference. He held Olivia's foe in trembling hands. He answered every question with precision and pain in his voice. But beneath the surface he was calm. The kind of calm that wasn't natural, the kind that didn't come from grief, but from control. Mark, too, had disappeared. No one had seen him since the night Olivia vanished. His phone was disconnected. His motel room was empty. The woman who managed the front desk said he had checked out without notice, left everything spotless. Nothing suspicious, just gone. It was a perfect storm of confusion. The police were pulled in 2 directions. Did Olivia leave with Mark, or had something happened to both of them? The case grew colder by the day. The trail was too clean, too empty. There were no leads, no witnesses, just a grieving husband, a missing wife, and a stranger who had slipped away without a trace. Daniel returned to normal life with strange ease. He went back to work. He helped with the school fundraiser. He visited Olivia's family with sympathy in his eyes. He did everything expected of him. But at night, alone in the house, he would sit in the dark for hours, listening to the wind outside and the silence pressing in from the walls. He knew no one would find her. He had made sure of that. What no one realized was how carefully he had planned it all. The secluded location, the timing, the route, each detail had been chosen to erase every trace. No confrontation, no violence in public. Just a clean disappearance. A vanishing act that buried not only Olivia but the truth. The town mourned, unsure whether to hold on to hope or accept the worst. And Daniel, hidden behind acts of grief, watched as the world moved on, unaware that the answers were closer than anyone dared to imagine. The secret was safe for now, but secrets have a way of clawing their way to the surface, no matter how deep they're buried. The forest was silent, the kind of silence that didn't feel peaceful. It felt like it was waiting. Just beyond the edge of Willow Creek, where the trees grew thick and the ground dipped into forgotten hollows, a hiker wandered off the main trail. He wasn't looking for anything in particular. It was a warm afternoon, and he wanted solitude. But as he stepped through a patch of overgrown brush, something unnatural caught his eye. The earth looked disturbed, like it had been moved and packed down by hand. The leaves didn't sit right, too neat in a place where nature was usually chaotic. There was a slight depression in the ground, shaped like a shallow dip, almost invisible unless someone was really looking. He moved closer, uncertain. Then he saw something that didn't belong. A small scrap of fabric, half buried in the dirt, pale and frayed like it had been out there for weeks. He called the police, his voice trembling as he gave the location. Within hours, yellow tape stretched between tree trunks, and officers with solemn faces combed through the area. They began to dig. What they found stopped the town in its tracks. It was Olivia. Her body was wrapped in a thin plastic sheet, carefully folded, placed deliberately as if someone had wanted to preserve what was left. There were no signs of violence, no wounds, no bruises, nothing obvious. But her lifeless eyes and the stillness of her body told a story more haunting than any visible injury could. She had been gone for over 3 weeks, and yet here she was, hidden beneath a layer of soil and silence. The town reacted with horror and disbelief. Candlelight vigils sprang up overnight. Flowers were left outside the Hart home. People who had once gossiped about Olivia's disappearance now whispered prayers for her. But the discovery also reignited something else, suspicion. All eyes turned to Daniel once more. The husband always plays a role in tragedies like this, they said. He had no alibi for the night she disappeared. He had shown no real signs of distress. He was too composed, too still. The police reopened their investigation with renewed energy. Olivia's phone records were re-examined. Surveillance footage from nearby streets was checked for overlooked details. But it was the burial site that raised the most questions. It was remote, difficult to find, and yet chosen with care. Whoever had placed her there knew the woods, knew the right place, knew how to make someone vanish. Mark, of course, remained missing. His name resurfaced in news reports and online forums. Some believed he had killed Olivia and fled. Others believed he was dead too, buried somewhere even deeper in the forest. But there was no trace of him. Not a single fingerprint. Not a single message since the night Olivia vanished. It was as if he had never existed at all. Daniel was questioned again. The detectives watched his every movement, measured every answer. He never flinched. He never broke. He said he was devastated. That he didn't know where Olivia had gone that night. That he had hoped she would come home. But the more he talked, the more people began to doubt him. There was something in his eyes, not sadness, not anger, but distance. Evidence, however, remained elusive. There were no footprints near the burial site. No fingerprints. No security footage placing anyone nearby. The car was clean. Olivia's phone was never recovered. Every lead led nowhere. It was like chasing shadows. Despite the whispers, no charges were filed. There was simply nothing that tied Daniel or anyone else to the burial. The case remained open but frozen, hovering in a strange limbo between suspicion and mystery. And yet the town could feel it. Everyone could. The way Daniel walked a little too confidently, the way he avoided certain streets, the way his eyes never quite met anyone else's. The truth was close, just beyond reach, hiding in plain sight like the body in the woods had been, waiting for someone to see what had been right there all along. Winter came early to Willow Creek that year. The days grew shorter, the winds colder, and with them came a new layer of unease that settled over the town like frost. Olivia's body had been found, but no justice had followed. The people wanted answers. They wanted closure, but all they had was silence. Then came the break. No one expected. Eleanor Moore lived on the edge of the woods, a retired school teacher known for her reclusive habits and sharp memory. She rarely spoke to anyone and preferred the quiet of her home, where she spent most days tending to her garden and feeding birds. But after news of the discovery in the forest spread, Eleanor began to recall something strange from the night Olivia went missing. At first, she tried to convince herself it didn't matter, but the more she thought about it, the more she realized it did. That night around 2 a.m., she had been woken by the sound of rustling leaves and a faint beam of light weaving between the trees. From her upstairs window, she'd seen someone, just a silhouette, dragging something large and heavy into the woods. The figure moved slowly, deliberately. She couldn't make out their face, but she remembered the way they walked, tall, steady, purposeful. It wasn't a random passerby. It was someone who knew where they were going. She hadn't thought much of it at the time. People sometimes wandered through the woods, but after hearing about Olivia's body being found in nearly the same location, the memory gnawed at her. Eventually, Eleanor came forward. She sat with the detectives and told them everything she could remember. How the figure was wearing a dark coat, how the flashlight beam had been narrow and low, how the dragging sound had echoed through the night like something being pulled over rocks and roots. When asked if she could describe the person's height and build, she hesitated only briefly before saying the figure matched Daniel's shape. Her testimony wasn't enough for an arrest. It was a sighting without confirmation, no physical proof. But it was enough to shift the investigation's tone. The police returned to Daniel's house, this time with more focus. They re-examined everything: the garage, the basement, the backyard. Forensic teams searched for any trace of soil, blood, or material fibers that could link him to the scene. Nothing conclusive surfaced. Daniel kept his composure. He cooperated, answered questions, even welcomed the detectives into his home without hesitation. On the outside, he appeared unshaken, but behind closed doors, he was unraveling. He knew Eleanor's statement had changed things. He hadn't planned for a witness. He had chosen that night specifically because the neighborhood was quiet, the forest empty, the weather bad. No one should have seen anything. But now, there was a crack in the story he had so carefully built. He couldn't undo the past. All he could do was wait. Hope. Keep his mask intact. But there was something else gnawing at him now: Mark. No one had seen Mark in over a month. There were no signs of him in town, no transactions on his accounts, no phone activity. If Mark had left willingly, he'd gone dark. But if he hadn't, where was he? Daniel had buried one secret already. Now he wondered if Mark might resurface, if something unexpected would expose everything. A phone call, a letter, a footprint. It wouldn't take much to bring the whole thing crashing down. The police began questioning other residents, retracing Olivia's final days, searching for missed details. A pattern began to emerge. She had seemed nervous in the last week, restless. Some said she was planning to leave town. Others claimed she had told someone she was afraid of what might happen next. Afraid of who? The weight of suspicion grew heavier. Daniel felt it everywhere. In the stares at the grocery store, in the way his coworkers spoke to him, in the silence that followed him like a shadow. Eleanor's memory had breathed new life into the case. And while the town searched for answers, Daniel was left with one terrifying truth. Secrets don't stay buried forever, not even in the cold, dark woods of Willow Creek. The days after Eleanor's statement felt like a countdown Daniel couldn't stop. The calm he had once mastered was cracking. He still wore the same quiet smile, still carried the same measured tone. But inside, a panic had begun to swell, slow and suffocating. He no longer felt control over the story he had created. The pieces were slipping, and he could feel them tilting against each other, ready to collapse. What haunted him the most wasn't Eleanor. It wasn't the police or the town's watchful eyes. It was the question that wouldn't leave him alone. Where was Mark? Daniel had expected him to run. He had hoped Mark would disappear the same night Olivia did, vanishing into the dark corners of another town, maybe another country. But there was something about Mark that had always been unpredictable, always dangerous. He didn't just walk away from things, he used them. And the longer he stayed missing, the more Daniel feared that Mark was hiding, waiting, watching. The investigation intensified. Police received an anonymous tip that Mark had been involved in illegal activity in another county. Extorts, stolen identities, suspected trafficking. The detectives believed Olivia may have discovered something she shouldn't have, something that connected Mark to a larger crime. It was enough to convince the authorities that her death might not have been about jealousy or betrayal. It might have been about silence. The theory quickly made its way to the public. The media latched onto the new angle. Olivia caught in a dangerous web. A lover with a criminal past. a husband quietly enduring heartbreak, while the world pointed fingers. The public's opinion began to shift. Some started to believe Daniel had been wronged, that maybe he had been caught in a nightmare he couldn't control, but not everyone was convinced. The police never fully let him go. Behind closed doors, they continued to dig deeper this time. They started revisiting phone records from Olivia's final weeks, reviewing anonymous emails, social media messages, even her cloud storage. What they uncovered wasn't solid proof, but it raised unsettling questions. On her phone's deleted folder, a partially recovered voice memo emerged. It was recorded days before her disappearance. Olivia's voice was shaky but clear. She spoke of fear, of knowing something she wished she hadn't found. She never mentioned names, but she said one line that chilled investigators. "If anything happens to me, it won't be an accident." The memo was enough to reclassify her death as suspicious, no longer just a missing person turned tragedy, but a potential homicide. The focus turned once again to the two men in her life, the vanished stranger and the husband with no alibi. Daniel felt the walls close in. He started seeing unmarked cars near his house, plainclothes officers parked across the street. He stopped sleeping altogether. The dread was constant now, pulsing like a second heartbeat. Every knock on the door made him flinch. Then came the final twist. Mark's name appeared again on a traffic camera scan from a remote highway almost 200 miles away. The footage was grainy, taken 3 days after Olivia's disappearance. It showed a man who resembled Mark driving a car registered to a woman who had reported it stolen months earlier. The timestamp matched a period when police believed Mark had already left town, but if he had been spotted alive and free, the idea that he killed Olivia and fled began to lose power. Questions mounted. If Mark didn't kill her, who did? And if he was still alive, why hadn't he come forward? The narrative began to shift again. Suspicion crept back toward Daniel, but this time with sharper edges. More investigators dug into the evidence, the more they saw a man who had motive, who had knowledge, and who had just enough control to make a murder look like a disappearance. And through it all, Daniel held his silence. But that silence was cracking, and the truth was clawing its way to the surface. The town of Willow Creek never truly returned to normal. Even after the search parties ended, even after Olivia's funeral, the streets seemed quieter. People spoke in whispers, glancing over their shoulders as if the truth still wandered somewhere in the shadows, unfinished, incomplete. Everyone had their own theory, but no one had answers, just pieces of a puzzle that didn't quite fit. Daniel Hart became something of a ghost. He went about his life in the same familiar routines, dropping the kids at school, picking up groceries, nodding politely at neighbors, but something in him had vanished. Not grief, not guilt, something deeper, like he had stepped out of his own life and was watching it from a distance. Though no charges had been filed, he remained under quiet surveillance. Police held him tightly within the circle of suspicion, waiting, watching, hoping he would slip. But Daniel didn't. He had built his walls carefully. The night Olivia disappeared had been orchestrated with the precision of someone who knew what he was doing and what he needed to hide. But walls don't last forever. One cold afternoon, nearly 2 months after Olivia's body had been found, a letter arrived at the Willow Creek Police Department. It had no return address. The envelope was plain, the paper inside stained with what looked like coffee or water. The letter was short, only a few lines, but its contents made the lead detective's hands tremble. Check the river, under the Red Bridge. One more secret. That same day, search teams were dispatched. They moved quickly, knowing the river might have washed away whatever clue had been left. But what they found wasn't a clue. It was a body, decomposed, weighted down with stones, wrapped in a tarp nearly identical to the one Olivia had been buried in. It was Mark Lawson. The autopsy confirmed it. Cause of death, blunt force trauma to the head. Estimated time of death, within 24 hours of Olivia's disappearance. The man everyone believed had killed her, had fled with her. was already dead when her body was placed in the woods. The revelation hit Willow Creek like a thunderclap. All the assumptions about Mark vanished. The police now faced a far darker truth. Someone had killed both Olivia and Mark, and only one person had reason to bury them both. Daniel was brought in for questioning again. This time, the pressure was different, tighter, colder. The evidence wasn't just circumstantial anymore. A neighbor had reported hearing something heavy being loaded into a vehicle behind the Hart house days before Olivia disappeared. A scrap of tarp identical to the ones found on both bodies had been recovered from Daniel's garage. A forensic analysis showed trace fibers matching those from the burial site. Still, he denied everything. His voice calm, his gaze steady. But when asked why Mark's body was found weighed down in a place only locals would know to hide something, Daniel paused. That pause was all it took. The police searched his devices again. This time, they found deleted GPS logs from his phone, placing him at the Red Bridge on the very night Mark had died. Not long after, soil samples from the underside of Daniel's SUV matched the grave site in the woods. The web he had built so carefully began to break apart, thread by thread. Soon after, Daniel was arrested. The trial gripped the entire town. Every detail came to light. How Daniel had followed Olivia, how he covered the affair, how he lured Mark to a false meeting and struck him down, how Olivia had confronted him, terrified by what he had done, and how Daniel, cornered, made his final irreversible choice. He buried both secrets, believing the silence would protect him. But silence has a sound, and in Willow Creek, that sound will echo for years.